They removed Ivara Kelm's pack name before they weighed the grain she had supposedly stolen. Hollow grain tithe house stood open to the winter courtyard so every family could witness the audit. Frost silvered the rafters. Empty ration baskets stood beneath the royal banners, each marked with a household that had gone short. Ivara waited beside the distribution table in the dark wool of a war widow. Her pack insignia remained pinned above her heart. For another moment, Royal Steward Iseldmar held the removal shears. The frontier accounts show a deficit of 480 meals, she said. All passed through Widow Kelm's authority. Not all reached my warehouse, Ivara answered. You signed the distribution rolls. I signed what left hollow grain. I did not sign what the royal convoys failed to deliver. A clerk placed 3 ledgers before Alpha King Bram Valecroft. The first showed the grain promised by the crown. The second showed it recorded as delivered. The third showed the meals Ivara had issued. The numbers appeared complete, until someone asked which families had actually eaten. The ledgers had no answer for mouths. Bram stood beneath the carved wolf standard in a black winter mantle. Ivara remembered him at Merritt's burial without the crown. Bram had promised, "Your husband died under my command. You will not stand alone while I live." Now a guard waited to collect the insignia, proving she belonged to the pack. Iseld opened the charge. Widow Kelm exceeded authorized relief, altered destination marks, and distributed protected grain without treasury release. I fed names already approved for winter support, names absent from the final royal list, because they were removed after the wagons failed to arrive. A murmur moved through the courtyard. Iseld turned one ledger toward Bram. The crown record's full delivery. Ivara looked at him, then asked the families. "This is an account hearing," Iseld said. "Not a grief assembly. Hunger is what accounts become when they leave the table." Bram's gaze settled on Ivara. "Did you issue grain beyond your authority?" "Yes." "Did you conceal those distributions?" "I entered every meal. Under widow relief, because no royal reserve remained to charge." Bram looked down at the ledgers. "Widow relief is a personal grant." "Yes. You used your own allowance to cover public distribution?" "I used what had not already been taken from me." Iseld marked a black column beside Ivara's name. Those transfers created an unauthorized deficit. A steward cannot turn private grief compensation into public policy. Then the crown should have sent the grain it promised. The crown ledger says it did. The children say it did not. Bram's jaw tightened. He had built his reign upon one promise. No household under Valecroft protection would starve. To question Hollowgrain was to question the claim separating his rule from his father's. Iseld knew where to place the choice. "Your Majesty, if one keeper may revise royal delivery by private judgment, every tithe house becomes its own crown." Ivara looked at Bram. "If one royal ledger can declare the hungry fed, no keeper is permitted to tell you when your kingdom is failing." His eyes changed. "Not enough." He took the removal order. "Merritt found discrepancies before he died," Ivara said. Uselt's hand still. Bram looked up. "What discrepancies?" "He said supply numbers were traveling faster than grain." "Did he give you evidence?" "He died carrying it toward the royal winter camp." "Merritt Kelm died in an enemy ambush," Iseld said. "No tithe records were recovered. No records were entered. That is not the same claim." "No," Ivara said. "It is the same absence." Bram signed. He had not stolen the grain. That was smaller than what he had done. He had made the missing grain legally Ivara's burden before he had made the crown prove its own delivery. The pen against parchment was smaller than the silence that followed. Under pack law, a person stripped of name could no longer receive grain through household standing, vote in winter allocation, inherit a storage key, or testify in a royal audit. The kingdom was not merely calling Ivara dishonest. It was removing her from the system required to challenge the accusation. Iseld cut the insignia from Ivara's cloak. The silver wolf fell into her palm. Bram reached toward Ivara when the torn fabric slipped. She pulled her hand away. He had once promised she would not stand alone. Now his signature had made standing beside her legally dangerous. The clerk scraped Kelm from the distribution board. "Ivara of no pack account," Iseld said. "You are removed from Hollowgrain authority pending repayment of the widow debt." The Moon-Tithe Abacus clicked. It rested at the center of the audit table, an ancient black frame strung with silver rods. One bead moved. Then another. "Secure the instrument," Yzeld ordered. The clerk reached for it. The abacus rose. Moonlight struck its rails. Beads began sliding like small bones tapping glass. One click. One meal. The count accelerated. The beads passed the column marked unauthorized withdrawal. They did not stop beneath Ivara's erased name. They moved through winter after winter. Children's portions, elder broth, nursing rations, burial house meals. Flour sent to families whose soldiers had not returned. Every bead represented food issued from an account that had never been legally responsible for providing it. Her widow allowance, her private compensation, her missing years. The silver beads fell from the final rail in a glowing stream. Not toward Ivara, toward Bram. Hundreds struck the stone around his boots. The Moon-Tithe Abacus did not know who had falsified the deliveries or who had profited from the missing grain. It did not forgive Ivara, accuse Yzeld, or read hunger as innocence. It counted obligation. It knew only where the burden should have rested. The last bead fell against Bram's royal signet. The beads had not returned her pack name. They had only refused to let Widow Relief carry a king's empty wagons. Then the abacus began counting again. The abacus had not cleared Ivara. It had only refused to count the king's hunger as widow debt. The silver beads remained around Bram Valecroft's boots. Yzeld recovered first. "The instrument has assigned obligation," she said. "It has not determined theft." Ivara looked at the empty place where Kelm had been scraped from the distribution board. "Burden is not theft. But it tells you whose name should not have been cut first." Yzeld held the severed insignia. Widow Kelm still exceeded her authority. She transferred private relief into public distribution and altered approved household totals. Because the authorized account contained grain that never arrived. The royal ledger records otherwise. Then open the delivery chain. A royal delivery did not exist in one ledger alone. Each convoy carried 3 proofs: a crown, granary departure mark, a district bridge tag, and an intake notch cut into the receiving household baskets. The crown could record grain as sent. Only hollow grain could prove it had arrived. Bram stepped away from the beads. "Repayment collection is suspended. Suspension may be read as acknowledgement that the widow debt is invalid," Yzeld said. "It is acknowledgement that the account is disputed." He faced the guards. "No one removes another pack name under a hollow grain shortage charge until this audit is complete. That order costs less than returning Ivara's name." He gave it anyway. A guard reached to move Ivara from the table. Bram stopped him. "She remains. A nameless debtor has no witness standing," Yzeld said. "Then grant temporary standing for this inquiry. Temporary witness standing does not restore warehouse authority." "No," Bram said. "Her hollow grain authority remains suspended." He had given her enough standing to answer the accusation. Not enough standing to survive it if the court chose not to listen. Ivara felt the distinction as clearly as the torn place over her heart. Bram had stopped the shears. He had not restored the name. The clerk brought forward the iron-bound delivery chain chest. Inside lay bone tags carved with convoy numbers and tied by destination. Ivara reached for the hollow grain bundle. Yzeld placed one finger on the knot. "Temporary witnesses may read. They may not alter evidence. I managed these chains for 9 winters. You no longer manage them. Then untie it yourself." Yzeld did. The first tags showed full departure from the royal granary. 300 sacks. 260. 194. Every number matched the crown ledger. "Full dispatch," Yzeld said. "Dispatch is not arrival." The first bundle contained no bridge tag. The second held one from Eastmere Bridge, 2 districts south. The third carried no crossing mark at all. Bram looked toward the clerk. "Why are the district crossings missing?" "They may have been filed separately after storm interruption. Winter convoys often change route," Yzeld said. "A missing bridge tag may indicate delay, diversion, or clerical mismatch." Ivara lifted an empty household basket from beneath the banner. Each approved delivery required the keeper to cut an intake mark beneath the family symbol. 1 notch for full receipt, 2 for partial delivery, a cross notch for spoiled grain refused. The basket was blank. So were the next 2. A royal ledger can be full while a child's basket remains empty. "Household baskets can be replaced," Yzeld said. "Not these." Ivara turned the first rim toward the court. I repaired this after the western roof collapse. That split is mine. She raised another. This belonged to the Sen household before their eldest son lost his leg at Frostmere. The families named did not speak. They did not need to. Bram ordered every hollow grain basket brought into the courtyard. Of the households recorded as fully supplied, 31 baskets carried no intake notch. 12 showed partial delivery. 7 had been marked after Ivara's authority was suspended. Late marking does not prove late grain. Isolde said. No. It proves the crown recorded arrival before hollow grain recorded receipt. Storm delay remains possible. Then the bridge should show passage after the storm. Bram ordered the toll archive opened. A bridge keeper read the convoy numbers aloud. The recorded hollow grain wagons had not crossed the winter bridge on the dates listed by the crown. 2 crossed 6 days later with reduced weight. 1 never crossed. A rerouted convoy may enter hollow grain without that bridge, Isolde said. There is no other pass for loaded grain after first snow. There is the Royal Camp Road. That road turns north before hollow grain. Convoys may be inspected at camp and released under military escort. Then the camp ledger should contain the transfer. Bram looked toward the clerk. Bring it. The Royal Winter Camp bundle rested beneath a second seal. Its tags were tied by military destination. Border companies. Wolf cavalry. Fortress kitchens. As Isolde separated the cords, 1 narrow bone tag slipped free and struck the table. Its edge carried a familiar double notch. Merritt's mark. Ivara did not touch it. Her hands had become too still. For one breath, she was back at the burial ground, hearing Bram promise she would not stand alone while a tag her husband had marked lay where his body had never been allowed to speak. Bram picked it up. The tag named a hollow grain convoy the Crown Ledger had already recorded as delivered. But it had been filed inside the Royal Winter Camp bundle. Not on the hollow grain route. The tag did not name who moved the grain. It only proved hollow grain had been counted somewhere the hungry families could not reach. A misplaced tag proves only clerical error, Isolde said. Bram turned it over. A second date had been carved into the bone. 3 days after Ivara Kelm's reported ambush. Ivara read the destination line beneath it. Royal Winter Reserve. Merritt had not died carrying rumor. He had died carrying the place where number outran grain. Merritt's tag had not named a thief. It had named a route the hungry had never been allowed to see. Isolde Mar rested one hand beside the bone marker. Camp inspection is not theft, she said. Convoys entering a military corridor may be weighed, held, or redirected before civilian release. No, Ivara answered. But it is not supper either. The Moon-Tithe Abacus hung silent above the table. It had counted obligation. The rest belonged to records, witnesses, and people willing to read what power had made ordinary. Bram ordered Merritt's tag wrapped in witness cloth and sealed under 3 marks: Crown, Bridge Keeper, and Temporary Witness. Ivara pressed her thumb into the wax last. Temporary standing allowed her to preserve evidence. It still did not return her name to the pack roll. Open the Royal Winter Reserve weight ledger, she said. Isolde looked toward Bram. The reserve contains military provisioning. Public disclosure may expose troop strength. Read only the hollow grain entries, Bram ordered. The camp clerk brought a gray wolf hide ledger recording each convoy beneath 4 columns. Dispatch weight, camp weight, reserve hold, and final release. Merritt's convoy appeared halfway through the winter section. Dispatch weight, 300 sacks. Camp weight, 271. 29 sacks disappeared before intake, Ivara said. Road loss, Isolde replied. Broken axles, moisture spoilage, torn coverings, wolf attack. Where are the damage marks? The clerk searched the margin. There were none. Every lawful transit loss required a black crescent beside the reduced weight. Spoilage required a knife cut through the convoy cord. Merritt's cord remained uncut. Bram looked at the clerk. Who presented the wagons? The escort captain. Name him. The escort line had been scraped until only the first letter remained. Winter ink often lifts from bone-treated parchment, Isolde said. Ivara looked at the untouched names above and below it. Only this escort suffered winter? Isolde pointed to the reserve column. Missing weight before intake does not establish misuse after arrival. The ledger showed 271 sacks entering the royal reserve. None continued immediately toward Hollowgrain. 3 days later, 80 sacks went to Frostwall's fortress kitchens. 60 went to the Wolf Cavalry. 40 supplied the royal winter camp. The rest remained under emergency hold. Bram read without speaking. His standing policy allowed military officers to retain civilian grain when border strength fell below the protected threshold. He had written it after 2 northern companies nearly starved. He had designed it to prevent soldiers from being abandoned. The ledger showed what that protection became when no one recorded the hunger transferred elsewhere. A reserve can be full while the households it protects go hungry, Ivara said. The northern packs faced invasion, Isolde answered. Military winter priority allowed temporary holding of grain, moving through camp. Temporary. Where is the release back to Hollowgrain? The remaining balance may have been merged into later convoys. Then the household baskets would carry later intake marks. Some do. Not enough for 190. 1 sacks. Because Widow Kelm distributed outside approved totals. Ivara's gaze hardened. You are charging my allowance for replacing grain the reserve held from us. I am stating that unauthorized distribution remains unauthorized. Bram had opened the camp ledger. Now he had to read what his winter policy had become in other people's mouths. Find the release order. Each reserve hold should end in military consumption, spoilage declaration, or civilian release. The Hollowgrain entry had no closing mark, but a thread hole showed an order had once been tied to the page. The clerk found a folded strip beneath 2 cavalry transfers. It authorized the remaining grain to return to Hollowgrain after the 7th-day military review. Merritt's double notch stood beside the convoy number. Merritt prepared the route, Ivara said. Or copied it, Isolde replied. His mark followed physical inspection. That is guild custom, not royal law. It is why his marks could be trusted when royal numbers could not. The release strip named Hollowgrain's Bridge, receiving hour, and warehouse door. It should have returned the grain before Ivara began using widow relief. It had never been carried out. A red cancellation line crossed the lower half. Emergency conditions can supersede release, Isolde said. By whose authority? Bram asked. The cancellation bore no personal name, only a policy code. Royal Winter Priority. Bram knew it before the clerk spoke. He had created the code during the 2nd year of his reign. It allowed reserve officers to cancel civilian release without returning the order for local review. It required only the king's standing seal. That seal remained pressed into the red wax. The grain did not vanish in a storm, Ivara said. It remained under lawful military priority, Isolde answered. And Hollowgrain was still marked as fed. That may be a reporting failure. It became my debt. That remains under inquiry. Bram did not defend the policy. He also did not revoke it. Not yet. Preserve the release order. Suspend the debt finding attached to these convoy totals. He suspended the debt before he restored the woman it had devoured. Ivara's name remained absent from the board. Her warehouse keys remained in royal custody. The charge could no longer be collected as settled truth, but the life it had consumed had not been returned. Merritt's mark had survived where his testimony had not. Bram turned the cancelled strip over. Beneath the royal seal, someone had written a final allocation note. Widow relief sufficient to absorb village shortfall. Ivara felt the words like a second cutting of her insignia. They had not only taken Merritt's absence, they had budgeted it. The note did not name the hand that wrote it. It only showed the court where the missing hunger had been taught to go. The note had not stolen grain. It had taught the ledger how to spend a widow. Isolde Mar folded her hands beside the cancelled release order. Widow relief is a lawful absorption category, she said. When military priority delays civilian grain, unused household compensation may cover temporary district need. Unused? Ivara asked. Unclaimed, uncollected, or administratively available. My allowance was none of those. You transferred it into public distribution. After Hollowgrain went hungry. Which made the transfer visible. Ivara looked at the line beneath Bram's standing seal. Absorption is a clean word when the person being consumed has already lost standing. The families beneath the winter banners remained silent. Some had received flour from Ivara's allowance. Others had eaten broth she should have been able to save for her own old age. They had known she was giving something private. They had not known the Crown had planned to use it before she chose. Open the Widow Relief Absorption Ledger, Ivara said. Isolde turned toward Bram. That ledger contains protected compensation accounts. It contains the account used to cover Hollowgrain's missing grain, Bram replied. Bring it. The clerk returned with a narrow iron case sealed by the Royal Winter Wolf. Bram broke the wax himself. The pages were arranged by campaign, dead soldier, household size, and remaining widow entitlement. Each account was supposed to protect the years of labor a husband could no longer provide. Ivara Kelm's entry appeared beneath the Frostmere campaign. 36 winter measures approved, 21 released to Ivara, 15 reserved for administrative absorption. The reserve date stood beside the amount, 2 days before Ivara issued the first meal beyond her authority. They charged the shortage to me before I spent anything, she said. Isolde examined the entry. The system can pre-mark available relief where emergency need is anticipated. Available to whom? The district. My husband's death allowance was not a district granary. Under Royal Winter Priority, protected funds may be temporarily converted when no active account can carry the shortfall. There was an active account. The Hollowgrain reserve was recorded as supplied. Falsely. That remains under inquiry. Bram read the authorization column. No personal signature appeared there. Only a policy code. Winter priority conversion. 7th clause. He knew the clause. He had approved it after fortress commanders complained that relief accounts sat untouched while military routes failed. The clause permitted automatic conversion of surplus-dependent compensation into emergency shortage cover. It required no widow's consent. It required no local witness. It required only that the royal ledger show the district as already supplied. The policy had not broken because Isolde abused it, Ivara said. It worked exactly as written. Bram's gaze remained on the page. The lower line had been rubbed pale beneath the policy code. Restore it. The clerk brought soot powder and a soft wolf hair brush. He dusted the page until the compressed letters rose dark against the parchment. Automatic conversion upon military retention. No local appeal required. No pack name standing preserved during recovery. Ivara read the final line twice. If the account was designed to consume my relief, why was my pack name cut for using it? Isolde answered without hesitation. Because administrative conversion and personal distribution are different authorities. The Crown could spend my widowhood without permission, but I could not spend it feeding the people the Crown abandoned. You could not alter public allocations by private judgment. Even when the public allocation existed only on paper, law cannot depend on what one keeper believes. It depended on what one king's ledger refused to see. Bram closed his hand over the page. Use of the 7th clause is suspended for every Hollowgrain route. Isolde's expression tightened. Suspending it during winter may leave military deficits uncovered. Then those deficits will be entered where they occur. And if that reveals reserve weakness to rival packs, then we will defend the weakness we have instead of hiding it inside widows. The order did not restore Ivara's name. It did not return her warehouse keys. It did not erase the debt column. Bram had suspended the policy before he restored the woman it had consumed. Ivara looked toward the empty space on the distribution board. Open Merritt's ambush record, Isolde said. The inquiry concerns grain. It concerns the widow account created from his death. The ambush was investigated by military command. Then military command can show when he became legally dead. Bram ordered the record brought. The camp clerk returned with a leather packet sealed in black wax. It contained the patrol route, the enemy contact report, the recovery list, and the official casualty filing. Merritt's body had not been recovered. His death had been entered through battlefield presumption. The first field notice stated that his convoy was attacked before reaching royal camp. The second recorded him missing. The final report declared him dead and authorized Ivara's widow account. Ivara placed the absorption ledger beside the casualty filing. The dates did not align. The Kelm allowance had been pre-marked for shortage absorption one day before the official casualty report opened the widow account. Isolde leaned closer. A preliminary loss notice may trigger provisional compensation. Where is the preliminary authorization? Ivara asked. The clerk searched the packet. There was none. The camp may have processed the account before the final report was copied, Isolde said. Then the source date should still appear. It may have been entered from oral command. Whose? No name is required under emergency casualty procedure. Bram looked at the clerk. When was Merritt's ambush report filed? Fourth bell on the 12th winter day. And the absorption note? Second bell on the 11th. The room went still. The note had not named who expected Merritt to become a dead husband. It had not shown who moved the grain, altered the route, or attacked the convoy. It proved only that the system had found a use for Ivara's widow account before Merritt's death had been officially recorded. Ivara touched the torn place above her heart. Merritt's death did not create the widow account. Her voice did not rise. The account was waiting for his death to become useful. The widow account had been prepared before Merritt was declared dead, but preparation was not yet proof that anyone had expected the ambush. Iseldmar closed the casualty packet with deliberate care. Campaign offices open provisional dependent accounts before final confirmation, she said. High-risk routes produce widows faster than distant clerks can process them. Merritt was a grain assessor, Ivara replied. Not a frontline rider. He traveled through a military corridor during active war. So did every flour wagon, which is why route exposure is assessed separately. Ivara looked toward Bram. Open the campaign risk roster. Iseld's expression remained composed. That roster contains projected losses. Public reading may be mistaken for a death list. It became one for my husband, Ivara said. Bram ordered the roster brought. It arrived in a long cedar case, its pages divided by military unit, civilian convoy, and protected royal service. Most names had been entered in the same narrow clerk's hand before the winter campaign began. Merritt Kelm's had not. His name appeared between two convoy guards in darker ink, crowded into a margin after the original list was complete. Beside it stood a small wolf head mark indicating probable dependent liability. Ivara leaned closer. When was he added? The clerk checked the roster index. 11th winter day. First bell. The absorption note had been entered 1 bell later, Iseld said. That sequence is ordinary. Risk classification precedes provisional account protection. What changed his risk? Route exposure adjustment. Show me the adjustment. A folded route slip had been stitched into the back of the roster. It reassigned Merritt from the camp inspection return to the northern timber cut, a narrow road known for raider attacks. The change carried no commander's name, only a camp administration seal. Bram read the route twice. Why was a grain assessor sent through the timber cut? Escort consolidation, Iseld said. Small personnel groups are often attached to outgoing patrols. He was supposed to return through Hollow Grain Bridge, Ivara said. The bridge route may have been closed. It was open. The tollkeeper recorded 3 salt carts that afternoon. Iseld turned toward the bridgekeeper. Salt carts are lighter than grain wagons. Merritt was 1 man, Ivara said. He did not require a wagon road. The camp clerk searched the reassignment notes. No closure order is attached. Bram's voice lowered. Who requested the change? The administration seal authorizes it. That was not my question. No personal name is required for routine escort consolidation. Ivara touched the edge of the route slip. The system prepared my widow account, then moved my husband onto the road most likely to create it. Iseld's gaze sharpened. That is an interpretation, not evidence. Yes. Ivara did not give her more. Then open the camp access register. Iseld paused. Bram noticed. Why? If Merritt carried discrepancies toward the Royal Winter Camp, he would have requested entry or an audience. Many convoy workers enter camp without royal access. Merritt told me he meant to place the records in the king's hands. Bram looked at her. You knew he was carrying evidence? I knew he believed someone was counting grain before it moved. He would not name anyone without the ledgers. And you did not report it? To whom? The office whose numbers he questioned? The answer landed without accusation. Bram ordered the access register opened. It was kept at the royal camp gate, where every petitioner, supply witness, military courier, and household representative received a bone token marked with arrival hour and purpose. The outer gate pages showed no Merritt Kelm. Iseld said. Then he never reached camp. Ivara looked at the binding. 1 page has been replaced. The gate clerk stiffened. The winter pages were smoke-darkened at their edges, except for 1 sheet that remained pale and smooth. What happened to the original? Bram asked. Water damage, Your Majesty. Only 1 page? A cup overturned near the register. When? The clerk could not answer without consulting a repair note. There was none. Ivara examined the stitching. The replacement was sewn with black widow thread. Isolde said, "Black thread is common. Not in camp records. Royal bindings use red gut cord." Bram ordered the stitching cut. A narrow strip of the original page remained beneath the new sheet, trapped against the spine. The clerk softened it with steam and laid it flat. Only 4 entries survived. The third carried Merritt's double notch. Ivara Kelm. Third bell. Purpose: direct delivery of hollow-grain discrepancy records. The camp had recorded him alive and present, Isolde said. A surviving line does not show whether he was admitted beyond the outer gate. No, Ivara answered. Open the audience petition bundle. The petition bundle contained requests denied, delayed, or redirected by camp administration. Merritt's token number appeared on a small gray slip. Direct audience refused. Material transferred for preliminary steward review. Return escort assigned by Northern Timber Cut. The review mark belonged to the Royal Steward's office. Not to Isolde personally. She said so at once. My office screened hundreds of petitions. Unverified local records were reviewed before anyone approached the king. Where are Merritt's records? Bram asked. If they were accepted, they should be in the steward archive. And if they were rejected, they would have been returned to him. Ivara looked at the route reassignment. Along the timber cut, Bram ordered the steward archive sealed, and Merritt's petition preserved under witness marks. He also suspended provisional death processing for every civilian convoy worker connected to Hollowgrain. Then he granted Ivara temporary account access to all Kelm-linked camp records. Not warehouse authority. Not pack standing. Enough access to read how her husband had been processed. Still not enough authority to speak as though the crown had wronged her beyond dispute. The clerk placed the original ambush notice beside the recovered gate entry. The notice claimed Merritt's convoy was attacked before first bell on the 11th winter day. The gate register placed Merritt inside the royal camp at third bell that same day. The report had not merely been filed late. Its first version described Merritt dying 2 hours before the camp recorded him alive. Ivara looked at Bram across the evidence table. Merritt had reached the king's camp. His records had been redirected. His route had been changed. And somewhere between the steward's review and the northern timber cut, the crown had begun telling the story of his death before he was gone. By dawn, the steward archive was no longer a room of records. It was the place where Merritt's testimony had been turned into procedure. Bram ordered its doors opened before Hollowgrain's witnesses. 2 royal guards broke the outer seal, while Isolde Mars surrendered the archive keys without protest. My office reviewed what reached it, she said. Review does not prove suppression. No, Ivara answered. The records will show what review meant. The archive clerk searched Merritt's petition token through 3 accession ledgers. He found it beneath civilian supply disputes, hollow-grain delivery variants, local concern regarding seasonal distribution delay. Preliminary review complete. The words were clean enough to contain no hunger. Where's his original statement? Ivara asked. The clerk opened the corresponding folder. It held 1 narrow abstract. No bridge tags. No intake basket rubbings. No convoy weight cord. Only 6 lines written by a steward scribe. Ivara read them aloud. Village keeper reports uncertainty regarding arrival timing. Military reserve procedures appear lawful. Household relief remains sufficient. No immediate threat to district stability. Her voice hardened on the final sentence. Hollowgrain had 31 empty household baskets. Isolde stood beside the archive table. An abstract records administrative relevance. It does not preserve every accusation in a petitioner's language. It removed the part where children had not eaten. It removed claims not yet verified. It changed missing grain into uncertainty. Because Merritt had not completed chain proof. He brought the chain proof here. That remains to be established. Ivara laid Merritt's gate token beside the abstract. He entered camp to deliver discrepancy records. Your office accepted them. My office accepted material for preliminary review, and reduced it to 6 lines that made an empty warehouse sound anxious. Bram took the abstract. A small black mark appeared in its lower corner. His winter briefing mark. Was this included in my camp report? The archive clerk searched the royal brief bundle. Yes, Your Majesty. He produced a thick packet containing the reports Bram had received during the same week Merritt vanished. Border strength. Fortress fuel. Wolf cavalry feed. Civilian reserve stability. The holograin abstract appeared between two military supply pages. Bram's handwriting crossed its margin. Preserve reserve confidence. Resolve through local account authority. Ivara looked at him. You did read about holograin. I read this. You read what the steward archive permitted Merit to become. Yiseld said. The king's instruction concerned public confidence during invasion. It did not authorize false delivery marks or harm to Merit. No, Ivara said. It authorized the office to keep the problem local after the local keeper had already been denied the grain needed to solve it. Bram did not defend the note. He also did not offer regret in place of action. Every civilian shortage complaint summarized without attached source records is reopened, he ordered. No steward abstract may close a village delivery dispute until the local intake chain is preserved. Yiseld's expression tightened. That will expose military reserve decisions to household challenge. It will expose whether the households recorded as supplied received anything. He turned to the clerk. Where are Merit's source records? The accession ledger contained an intake weight. 8 pounds, 4 ounces. The abstract folder weighed less than 1. A second column claimed the source packet had been returned to Merit after review. Show the release receipt, Ivara said. The clerk found a gray slip tied behind the accession page. Materials returned to petitioner. 5th bell. No witness signature. No receiving mark. Only the steward office code. Merit had already been assigned the northern timber route by 5th bell, Ivara said. Yiseld replied. The packet may have been given to his escort. Then the escort should have signed. Emergency movement does not always allow full acknowledgement. Ivara examined the release cord. Merit tied document packets with a doubled left knot. His right thumb never bent properly after Frostmere. The cord carried a single archive knot. This packet was closed by someone who had never handed it back to him. That proves a clerk tied the cord, Yiseld said. Not that the records remained here. Bram ordered the restricted source shelves opened. The archive clerk hesitated. Those shelves contain unverified testimony and protected military documents. They also contain evidence listed as returned. The clerk unlocked the iron grating behind the main stacks. Each source packet was stored under a shelf code rather than a petitioner's name. Merit's abstract carried a faint secondary number beneath the binding glue. The clerk followed it to a narrow box marked Reserve Confidence Review. Inside lay petitions from villages whose recorded deliveries had been redirected through military camps. Some contained only fragments. Others held complete household chains that had never reached local hearings. Merit's packet rested at the bottom. Its waxed cloth still carried Ivara's household seal. She did not open it immediately. For years, the Crown had treated Merit's warning as something grief had invented after his death. Now the weight of his proof rested beneath her hand. Bram reached toward the seal. Ivara stopped him. My temporary standing preserves evidence. It does not give you the right to open my husband's packet before the witness circle is complete. He withdrew his hand. The bridgekeeper, archive clerk, and 2 holograin widows placed their marks beside hers. Only then did Ivara break the wax. Merit had packed the records in order. Royal departure slips. Missing bridge tags. Rubbings from empty household baskets. Camp scale discrepancies. Copies of the reserve transfers. At the bottom lay a written request for direct audience with Bram. The final page contained Merit's own summary. Holograin grain is being counted as village delivery before entering military reserve. Widow accounts are marked to carry the difference. If this continues, hunger will appear as household debt rather than crown failure. Bram read it without looking away. Yiseld said, The packet's survival proves the archive preserved his allegations. It was logged as returned, Ivara replied. A filing error. Then why was it placed under reserve confidence? Because it concerned military allocation. Ivara lifted the cover sheet attached to the packet after Merit surrendered it. Source material withheld pending confidence review. Do not return before petitioner's departure. The authorization line contained no personal name. Only the steward office code and Bram's standing reserve seal. The time mark was 2nd bell. Merit's route had been changed to the northern timber cut at 3rd. The packet did not reveal who ordered the ambush or who expected Merit to die. It proved something narrower. The archive had been instructed to keep his evidence before the Crown sent him away without it. Merit had left the steward archive without the evidence he came to deliver, and the road assigned to him had already been chosen. Isolde Mar stood beside the open source box. Evidence review and escort assignment are separate procedures, she said. A retained packet does not make a lawful route change suspicious. No, Ivara replied. The timing does. The timing shows only that camp administration moved quickly. It moved faster than Merritt's complaint could reach the king. Bram ordered the escort command ledger brought into Hollowgrain's witness circle. The ledger recorded every civilian attached to a military patrol. Departure hour, escort captain, assigned road, destination, and arrival confirmation. Merritt's line named the Northern Timber Cut. Departure. Third bell. Escort captain. Hadron Pike. Arrival confirmation. None. Isolde pointed to the empty column. The patrol was attacked before reaching the Northern Watch. Then Captain Pike's patrol log should record the dead. Ivara said. The military clerk found Hadron Pike's file. The captain had not commanded a patrol that day. He had been confined to the camp infirmary with a shattered knee after a cavalry fall 2 nights earlier. Bram read the physician's seal. Could another officer have used his route authority? Under emergency substitution, Isolde said. A senior rider may carry a wounded captain's command token. Name the substitute, Bram ordered. No substitute appeared in the ledger. The escort roster contained 4 soldiers, but none had marked departure. 2 were assigned elsewhere. 1 had already crossed south before second bell. The 4th had been dead for 6 days. Ivara looked at Isolde. The report gave Merritt an escort that never assembled. It gave him an escort record, Isolde answered. Whether every mark was completed before departure is another matter. Then open the Timber Cut watchbook. The Northern Watch kept its records on thin horn tablets because parchment froze and split in the mountain damp. Every patrol crossing the Timber Cut struck its token against a moon salt plate, leaving a pale impression of route number and hour. No royal escort crossed at third bell. No civilian grain assessor crossed later. The road had remained empty until dusk. Isolde examined the tablets. An ambush may have occurred before the watch post. Then someone must have seen the patrol leave camp, Ivara said. The outer gate register was damaged. We already found Merritt's entry beneath the replacement page. His arrival entry. Not his departure. Ivara returned to the gate ledger. Royal camp used different marks for those who departed freely, and those moved under administrative escort. A plain cut meant open departure. A closed crescent meant controlled transfer. The replacement page contained neither, but the original strip beneath its binding extended farther than the clerk had first recovered. Bram ordered the seam reopened. Steam loosened another narrow section. Merritt's name appeared again at the bottom, not beneath ordinary departure, beneath controlled transfer. The destination column carried only a policy code. Reserve confidence. Third passage. Isolde said, Controlled transfer is not imprisonment. Petitioners carrying sensitive military claims may be escorted away from public routes. Where? Ivara asked. The destination is restricted. My husband vanished under that code. That does not alter the restriction. Bram held out his hand for the camp policy register. Third passage had been created during the first winter of his reign. It allowed administrators to remove petitioners whose claims might provoke panic before military facts could be reviewed. The king's standing seal authorized transfer without a public destination entry. Bram read the clause in silence. His law had not ordered anyone to harm Merritt. It had made Merritt movable without witnesses. Open every third passage transfer connected to Hollowgrain, he said. Isolde's posture changed by less than a breath. Those entries may contain confidential informants. Cover unrelated names. The code loses function if destinations become public. The code has already lost lawful protection where it concealed a missing witness. Bram suspended third passage use for civilian supply petitioners. He placed all reserve confidence transfers under independent review by the bridgekeeper, 2 Hollowgrain widows, and a military clerk outside Isolde's office. It was action. It was not restoration. Ivara still stood without the silver wolf at her breast. The transfer packet contained 3 Hollowgrain entries. 2 named clerks returned south after questioning. The third carried Merritt's token. His destination had been abbreviated as LGH-Plan. The military clerk searched the camp map. Lower Grainhold. Ivara knew the place. It was not on the northern timber cut. It stood beneath the royal winter camp, where disputed cargo was kept until ownership could be settled. Then Merritt never left camp at Third Bell, she said. Izeld replied. He may have been held briefly before joining the escort. Show the release. The packet contained none. Bram ordered the lower grain hold register opened. Its pages listed confiscated grain, broken seals, disputed wagon loads, and persons detained for questioning beside restricted cargo. Ivara Kelm appeared under the 11th winter day. Admitted. Fourth bell. Reason. Suspected interference with protected reserve accounting. Property received. 1 coat. 1 knife. 1 marriage ring. Ivara's breath caught at the final item. Merritt never removed that ring. Not for sleep. Not for work. Not even when the winter cold swelled his hands. For one breath was too small a measure for what returned to her. She remembered turning that same ring beneath the burial cloth, when there had been no body inside it. Where is the property release? She asked. The clerk turned the page. No personal belongings had been signed back to Merritt. Izeld said. Missing release marks are common when detainees depart under military escort. Then the escort received them. No receiving mark appeared there either. Bram's hand tightened against the table, searched the hold inventory. The marriage ring was not listed among transferred property, nor among the dead. A sealed lower drawer contained objects whose owners had been reclassified before final disposition. The clerk opened it under witness. Inside lay knives, household tokens, broken insignia, and 3 marriage rings tied to bone labels. Ivara recognized Merritt's before the clerk lifted it. The inner silver carried the shallow cut she had made by accident on their first winter together. Its bone label bore a later date. 17th winter day, 6 days after the ambush report claimed him dead. The ring had been entered under one final classification. Petitioner transferred alive for continued reserve inquiry. The record did not say who questioned him, where he was taken, or when he died. It proved only that the Crown had kept Merritt alive in its custody while telling Ivara he had already been lost on the road. The Crown had declared Merritt dead before it finished questioning him. Izeld Mar stood beside the open property drawer while Ivara held the marriage ring beneath the winter light. Alive in custody does not mean unlawfully held, Izeld said. Reserve interference during wartime permits continued examination. Then open the examination record. The testimony concerns protected military allocation. It concerns a man whose death was reported while he was still answering your clerks. Bram ordered every Kelm custody file brought into the witness circle. The lower grain hold maintained 2 records for each detained petitioner. The public register recorded admission, property, and transfer. The examination ledger preserved questions asked behind the inner door. Merritt's name appeared across 3 sessions. First examination, 4th bell, 2nd, 7th bell, 3rd. Following morning, no examiner's personal name appeared. Each page carried the steward office code. Izeld said. Questions were assigned by office, not individual clerk. Ivara read the first summary. Petitioner claims hollow grain delivery marks precede physical receipt. Petitioner unable to identify responsible officer. Military retention lawful under winter priority. They turned his evidence into an inability to accuse someone, she said. He could not name an officer. He named what the records were doing. Mechanism is not guilt. No. But mechanism is how guilt survives without needing to sign its own work. The second examination asked whether Merritt accepted that military need could lawfully delay village grain. His answer had been copied beneath it. Military need may delay delivery. It cannot mark undelivered grain as received. Bram read the line twice. The next question asked whether Ivara had issued unauthorized meals. Merritt had answered yes. Izeld indicated the response. Even her husband confirmed the violation. Ivara continued reading. The sentence below had been compressed into the binding. She ordered the thread loosened. The clerk opened the seam. Merritt's full answer appeared. Yes. She issued meals because the authorized grain was held elsewhere, while the households were still recorded as supplied. Calling her distribution unauthorized does not make the hunger authorized. The witnesses around the table remained quiet. Bram's gaze stayed on the page. Why was the second sentence hidden in the binding? Binding errors occur when examination sheets are recopied, Izeld said. 3 times? Ivara asked. The third session contained no summary. Only a refusal form. Merritt had been asked to sign a statement affirming that hollow grain's shortage resulted from local overdistribution rather than royal retention. The signature line remained blank. Beside it, Merritt had written, "I will not make my wife's mercy responsible for the grain your reserve kept." Ivara's fingers closed around the ring. There had been no body to bury. No final voice. Only an empty cloth. Bram's promise. And 12 winters of being told grief had made her suspicious. Now Merritt's refusal rested before her in his own hand. Bram reached toward the page. Ivara covered it first. "You may read it," she said. "You may not carry it away from the witness circle." He withdrew his hand. Agreed. No apology. No request that she soften. Only the first obedience he had offered her since signing away her name. The final custody line recorded that Merritt requested direct audience with the king. Denied pending stability review. He requested that Ivara be summoned as a local account witness. Denied because household involvement might compromise reserve inquiry. He requested his evidence returned. Deferred until recantation review concluded. He was not being questioned to discover whether he was right, Ivara said. He was being held until he agreed to make the shortage local. Iseld's expression remained measured. Recantation review is an administrative term. Petitioners may be asked to clarify claims that threaten winter confidence. Confidence in what? That the reserve could sustain the war. It sustained the war by pretending hollow grain had eaten. Before Iseld answered, a horn sounded from the outer yard. 3 short calls. Warehouse shortage. A hollow grain keeper entered with Frost on his shoulders. The Eastern families have received no morning issue. The remaining public bins will not cover 2 days. Iseld said. Distribution remains suspended while the audit is active. Ivara turned toward Bram. Open the Royal Reserve. The available grain is under military winter protection. Iseld warned. So were the sacks taken from hollow grain. Releasing disputed stock before final reconciliation may create a second deficit. The first deficit is standing outside. Bram looked through the open doors. Women waited beneath the banners with empty baskets. Several wore widow black. Children stood close to their skirts, conserving warmth and movement. How much is required? He asked. Ivara answered without consulting a ledger. 40 sacks for 5 days if elder portions are separated. 52. If the southern households arrive before the next snow. Iseld looked at her. You no longer hold warehouse authority. No. I still know who must eat. Bram ordered 52 sacks released under joint witness. Iseld's voice sharpened. To whom will custody pass? Not to Ivara's personal account. Ivara said. She looked toward the widows beneath the banners. To a temporary household council. 5 women. Every sack weighed publicly. Every basket marked at intake. Bram granted the council emergency distribution authority. He did not restore Ivara's pack name. He gave her temporary account access to supervise the release but withheld permanent warehouse command until the inquiry ended. Enough power to prevent hunger. Still borrowed from the man who had erased her. The reserve doors opened before the courtyard. As the first sacks were carried out, Ivara noticed silver wax beneath their military seals. She scraped one edge with her thumbnail. A prior destination mark appeared underneath. Hollow grain household relief. The sacks had not merely passed through Royal Reserve. They had been relabeled as Crown Emergency Grain before being returned to the families from whom they had been withheld. The camp clerk found the corresponding credit ledger. 480 meals had been entered beneath a royal commendation draft. Winter famine prevented through decisive steward administration. The credited office was Iseld Mars. Her personal signature did not appear, only the seal of her authority. The same 480 meals used to strip Ivara's pack name had already been counted as the Crown's success. The Crown had praised itself for feeding hollow grain with the same 480 meals it had charged to Ivara's widow account. Iseld Mars stood beside the commendation draft without reaching for it. Royal credit records outcome, she said. The families received grain. The reserve prevented famine. The reserve caused the shortage it later claimed to solve, Ivara answered. Military retention delayed distribution. It did not erase the grain. It erased where the grain came from. The emergency sacks were released under steward administration. After they were relabeled, Iseld's gaze remained steady. Relabeling disputed stock under Crown custody is lawful. So is writing a clean name over someone else's hunger? Bram took the commendation draft from the clerk. The language praised decisive stewardship, disciplined reserve management, and the prevention of frontier unrest. No widow appeared in it. No empty basket. No mention of the private allowance that had carried families through the missing days. Strike the commendation, Bram ordered. Iseld turned toward him. The draft has not yet been formally awarded. Then it will not be. Your Majesty, an administrative office cannot function if every lawful outcome is judged by the suffering preceding it. Ivara looked at the 480 meal credit. That is exactly when it should be judged. She moved to the Moon-Tithe Abacus. The ancient frame still hung above the audit table. Its beads had remained silent since assigning the burden to Bram's royal account. I want a full reconciliation, Iseld said. The abacus has already counted the widow obligation. It counted where the burden belonged. It has not compared the crown's claimed success with the accounts that paid for it. The commendation ledger is not a tithe instrument. The meals are. Bram ordered the 5 temporary widow counselors to bring their household issue records. Each woman placed her winter book beneath the abacus. Ivara added the Kelm allowance ledger, hollow grain's empty basket register, the relabeled reserve seals, and the steward commendation draft. The royal clerk entered the same number into the crown credit column. 480 meals. The first silver bead moved. Then another. The sound filled hollow grain tithe house. Note accusation. Reconciliation. Each bead passed the widow accounts from which food had been drawn. It crossed the household baskets that had received relief. It touched the reserve record where the same grain had been retained, relabeled, and later returned. Then it struck the royal credit rail. The commendation column emptied one bead at a time. 480 measures of supposed crown success slid away from steward administration and settled beneath the royal obligation mark. The abacus did not write Iseld's name. It did not declare Ivara innocent of exceeding authority. It showed only that the crown could not claim credit for meals already purchased through widow loss. When the final bead stopped, a new balance appeared in silver. Royal account indebted to hollow grain widow households. The courtyard breathed as one body. Iseld recovered before anyone else. Debt reconciliation does not determine criminal responsibility. No, Ivara said. It determines who must stop calling our survival your generosity. Bram ordered the royal debt entered into the public pack ledger. Not as charity. As reimbursement owed. He suspended Iseld's authority over hollow grain relief, reserve conversion, and pack name debt findings pending independent inquiry. He did not order her imprisoned. The evidence established what her office had done. It had not yet established which hand altered each route, rewrote each report, or arranged Merritt's final transfer. Iseld gave up her seal without resistance. You are weakening the office during winter, she said. I am preventing the office from judging records it controlled. Bram turned toward Ivara. Your pack name will be reviewed before the full witness council. Reviewed? The original removal cannot stand without rehearing. It already stood long enough to remove my food rights. His face tightened. He did not ask her to forgive the difference. Ivara remained without her insignia. The crown now owed the widows. It had not yet returned the legal identity required for them to collect without royal permission. Open Merritt's final transfer record, she said. The lower grain hold ledger ended with his classification as alive under continued reserve inquiry. A second packet recorded transfers from restricted custody. Merritt had been moved on the 17th winter day. Destination: Royal Private Reserve Court. Purpose: demonstration of disputed grain seals before King's inspection. Ivara looked at Bram. You were meant to see him. I held no private reserve inspection that day. Iseld said. Demonstrations are often prepared before being placed on the King's schedule. Who cancelled it? Bram asked. The schedule line bore a reserve confidence code, not a personal name. Audience deferred due to instability risk. Merritt had refused to withdraw his accusation. His demonstration was therefore denied until he accepted the official delivery account. The transfer inventory listed 3 grain sacks, 1 scale weight, and 1 sealed evidence packet. The packet was missing. The sacks were not. They had been entered into Bram's private winter stores. The same stores now supplying the emergency release to hollow grain. Ivara examined the relabeled seals again. 1 sack carried a narrow double notch beneath the silver wax. Merritt's mark. Bram ordered it opened before the witness circle. Inside, beneath the grain, lay a thin wooden tally board wrapped in oilcloth. The front recorded the convoy's true weights. The back carried Merritt's handwriting. If this reaches the king, hollow grain was counted as fed before its grain entered his reserve. Ivara's widow allowance has been prepared to carry the difference. Do not let them call her mercy theft. Bram read the message without touching it. Merritt had placed the truth inside grain intended for the king's own table. The final line was written more heavily, as though the board had moved beneath his hand. I was promised release if I signed against my wife. I refused. Beneath the message was a destination tally for Merritt himself. It did not lead to the northern timber cut. It led to the old moon cellars beneath Valecroft's private reserve court. The crown had not lost Merritt on the road. It had taken him deeper inside the king's own house. The old moon cellars were not a prison in the royal record. That was why Merritt had been allowed to disappear inside them. Bram opened the private reserve court before Hollowgrain's witnesses. Ivara entered first with Merritt's tally board beneath her arm. Behind her came the 5 widow counselors, the bridge keeper, 2 independent pack elders, and a military clerk outside Iseult Mar's authority. Iseult walked under guard, but no chains bound her. The evidence had suspended her office. It had not yet replaced inquiry with punishment. Stone steps descended beneath the royal grain vaults. At the bottom stood 6 moonwood doors built to hold disputed cargo during winter inspection. Only one carried a human custody mark. Ivara Kelm. The cell ledger classified him as a reserve witness rather than a prisoner. That distinction had removed him from ordinary detention roles. No prisoner ration. No infirmary inspection. No public hearing date. He was held here without being counted as a man in custody, Ivara said. Iseult's voice remained level. Reserve witnesses were housed temporarily while sensitive claims were reviewed. How long was temporary? The cellar ledger answered. 9 days. Merritt had scratched 1 line into the moonwood wall for each morning. Beside the final 3, he had carved small, empty baskets. The physician's record was tied behind the door inventory. It described fever, weakness, and an untreated injury sustained during controlled transfer. Cause of death: winter decline. No body had been released to Ivara because Merritt's status remained under reserve inquiry. He had been buried beneath the camp's unnamed witness ground. Bram read the page without moving. You told her he died in an enemy ambush. Iseult looked toward the ledger. The first field report carried that account. Later, custody records were restricted under reserve confidence. You allowed the false report to remain. I preserved military stability while the allegation was unresolved. He was dead, and the border was still at war. Ivara touched Merritt's marriage ring through the cloth around her hand. You kept wolves fed at the wall by teaching the kingdom not to count the people beneath it. Iseult did not confess to ordering Merritt's detention, withholding his records, or falsifying the ambush. She argued that every action bore a lawful office code. Every transfer served reserve protection, and every restriction prevented panic during invasion. The independent clerk entered each claim. The hearing would determine which orders Iseult issued personally and which abuses arose from policies Bram had authorized. Ivara did not ask for a faster judgment than the one denied to Merritt. Record the mechanism whole, she said. Then no one can bury the system inside one guilty name. Bram ordered Merritt's remains recovered from the unnamed ground and returned under his true pack name. He revoked third passage transfers, automatic widow absorption, and unreviewed civilian release cancellation across every Valecroft reserve. Then he turned toward Ivara. The pack name council is assembled. It met above ground in Moon-Tithe House. Bram did not preside. The bridge keeper, pack elders, household witnesses, and widow counselors reviewed the removal order against the full delivery chain. They found that Ivara's name had been cut before the crown proved delivery, while her relief account had already been prepared to carry a royal shortage. The removal had never satisfied pack law. The eldest counselor returned the silver wolf insignia. Ivara Kelm, she said. Your name was not lost through debt. It was unlawfully removed. Ivara accepted the insignia from the council, not from Bram. Her name was restored first on the hollow grain distribution roll, beside every household she had kept alive. The Moon-Tithe Abacus moved once. 1 silver bead crossed from the nameless column and settled beneath Kelm. Nothing more. It did not forgive the crown. It recorded that the account could no longer pretend she did not exist. Bram ordered the 480 meal obligation, repaid directly to Ivara. She refused. Isolde watched from the witness bench. The allowance was taken from your account, Bram said. The meals were eaten by Holograin. Then name the repayment. Ivara placed a charter before him. Permanent control of local reserve intake to a widow household council. No village mark supplied without basket witness. No military hold without public weight loss. Widow compensation cannot be converted without consent. And no pack name may be removed by the office that benefits from calling a shortage personal debt. You are asking the Crown to surrender control of frontier grain. I am asking it to stop confusing control with care. Bram read every clause. Then he signed away the royal majority on Holograin's grain council. The Crown retained 1 seat. The widows held 5. The public reversal was entered beneath the same banners that had witnessed Ivara's erasure. Royal account debtor to the widows of Holograin. Isolde was removed from stewardship pending trial for evidence suppression, false reporting, unlawful custody administration, and conflicted debt findings. She left without confession. The records no longer required one to remain open. Merritt was buried again 3 days later beneath the Kelm name. Bram stood beyond the family stones until Ivara chose whether he might approach. He did not repeat his old promise. Protection spoken by a king had already cost her too much. After the burial, he held out the restored warehouse keys. Ivara took them without touching his hand. You once promised I would not stand alone, she said. I remember. You answered that promise by deciding what truth your throne could survive. Yes. No defense followed. Do not promise me protection again. What may I promise? Nothing. She turned toward Holograin, where 5 widows waited beside the reopened storehouse. Bram remained where she left him. Weeks later, he returned during the first council distribution. He wore no crown and carried no decree. Ivara let him sit at the far end of the table, not as her protector, not as the man forgiven, as the representative of an account still learning how to repay what power had called invisible.